Do we have any medical experts in the room? I think we may have a doctor. Don't worry, I'm not going to call you up to the front. I've brought my medical kit with me this morning. Here it is. It's got just a few things inside it. I was wondering whether someone might be willing to come and get the first one out for me and hold it up. Okay, go on, Matilda. All right, could you take this for us? And hold it up nice and high. Who can tell us what this is? Go on, Etty. Stethoscope. Does anyone know what it's for? Yes. Exactly. The doctor will put it on their ears, put it against your chest, and listen to hear your heartbeat. Can I have another volunteer? Etty. Could you take this one, please? And hold it up nice and high. Anyone know what this one is? Yes. A thermometer. Great. What's it for? What might the doctor use a thermometer for? Yes? Yes, to measure your temperature to see how hot or cold you are. Can I have a third person? Yes. Can you hold up this one for us? Nice and high. Great. What's this? Who knows what this is? You might want to demonstrate how to use it. How would a doctor use it? Oh, there's a little clue there. Yes. It is a syringe. Well done. What would a doctor use a syringe for? Yes? Yes, to inject a liquid or medicine into you. One more person. Or two more people. Yes? Can you take this one for us? Now, I think this is getting a little bit harder. I had to look up some of these myself. Let's hold this one nice and high. Anyone know what this is? Adults, you can join in too. It's getting a bit hard for the children. This is a reflex hammer. That's what a real one looks like, apparently. Used to, they would tap it on your knees, on your elbows, to see if your limbs are moving as they should. One more volunteer. Yes. There we go. Anyone know what this is? Or if you don't know what it's called, perhaps what it does. Yes. Very good. This is apparently called an otoscope, I believe. And it's used to look inside your ears. Thank you, guys. Can you pop them away in here? And you can go sit down. Great job. Doctors use different tools to help us. But sometimes us adults are not always good at going to the doctor for help. It'll get better on its own, we say. It's not really that bad. I don't have time to go to the doctor. I'm too busy. We know we need help, but instead of going to the doctor and asking for help, we struggle on with our aches and our pains. Well, in Matthew chapter 8, verse 5, we have just met someone who knew he needed help and knew where to go to get it. Verse 5, Matthew wrote, "When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking for help." A centurion, as you can probably tell from the picture, was a Roman soldier. "Lord," this man said, "my servant lies at home, paralyzed, suffering terribly." Have any of you ever had a paper cut? They hurt, don't they? Well, imagine that pain, multiply it by about 100. Have any of you ever stubbed your toe so hard that the nail turned black and fell off? I have. That hurt. Imagine that, multiply it by about 10. Have any of you been in such pain that you had to call an ambulance and get rushed to hospital? Well, imagine that and multiply it by 2. And that's probably about where our centurion's servant was at. In Luke's version of the story, he tells us that man was about to die. He was suffering terribly, and his master was desperate to find help for him. Wonderfully, he had heard that Jesus was nearby and that Jesus could do incredible things. So he rushed to Jesus. Now that may feel like a very obvious thing to do to us. But remember, this man was a Roman soldier. This is a map of the Roman Empire, started in Italy. You can see where Rome is. And this is the area they had taken over by the time that Jesus was on earth. So this man was a Roman soldier. And Jesus was a Jewish religious leader from here, from Judea, one of the areas that the Romans had invaded. And the Romans and the Jews were not friends. The Jewish people did not like the fact that the Romans had taken over their land. According to the Bible, the Old Testament rules, a Jewish person shouldn't stay with, eat with, or even go into the house of someone who wasn't Jewish like them, let alone a Roman enemy. For a Roman centurion to ask a Jewish Bible teacher for help would be a bit like a Russian soldier in Ukraine today asking a Ukrainian to help them out. This would have been pretty shocking for the people watching, embarrassing for the centurion, and a bit surprising and awkward for Jesus, having this Roman soldier asking him for help. So Jesus asks him a question. Shall I come and heal him? You want me to come? You sure? And the centurion replies in verse 8, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. You don't need to come, Jesus. Just say the word. That's all you need to do. Well, Jesus is bowled over by this man's faith, that this man understands that Jesus is so powerful that he doesn't even need to be in the room for a healing miracle to occur. Verse 13, Jesus said to the centurion, Go, let it be done, just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that moment. Just like that. 10, 20, maybe 30 miles away from where Jesus and the centurion were, the sick young servant gets out of his bed, healed. Jesus says the word, and it happens. And if that sounds ordinary to you, because you know the Bible, you know that this is the sort of thing that Jesus does, just imagine for a moment calling up your doctor on the phone and telling them all your symptoms and asking for their help. And your doctor responding, not book an appointment, come in and see me, not take these pills, do these tests, try this diet, do these stretches, get some rest. But your doctor just saying, you're better now. And it happens. You get off the phone and you feel absolutely fine. That's what Jesus does. That's the sort of transformation that Jesus is able to complete. That's the time scale he works in. That's the distance from which he's able to do things. That's Jesus. He's God's healer. Isn't he incredible? In verse 14, we meet another person who needs Jesus' help. Still in Capernaum, Jesus goes to his friend Peter's house, where he finds Peter's wife's mum, his mother-in-law, in bed and sick with a fever. Jesus surveys the scene, and in just a few short words, one verse, verse 15, Jesus touched her, the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. A tiny, personal, hardly seen by anyone, hardly heard about by anyone miracle, but no less incredible, no less life-transforming, no less extraordinary. Dr. Jesus strikes again. Evening falls, verse 16, and many who were demon-possessed were brought to Jesus, and he drove out the spirits with a word and healed all who were ill. Dr. Jesus God's healer, powerfully healing person after person after person, never running out of energy, ability, compassion, one by one, taking away their struggles and transforming their lives with just a word, just a touch. Here is Dr. Jesus, God's healer. And just as the sun is setting on this passage, Matthew takes out his bag, he takes out his Bible, and he reads Isaiah 53, verse 4 to us. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. Whoa. Hang on a minute, Matthew. What are you doing getting Isaiah 53 out? That's a bit like saying that tonight's Euros final is going to be like England's 1966 World Cup victory. You just don't go there. You don't say it. You don't get people's hopes and expectations up like that. Because Isaiah chapter 53 was the prophet Isaiah's beautiful song about a God-given, suffering servant who'd be treated awfully, would take our sin and sickness upon himself, and would die to save God's people. What are you doing, Matthew? Getting the song of the suffering servant out. You can't do that. You can't get our hopes up like that. But here he is. Matthew whispers, do you see this Jesus? He's him. He's the one. He's the suffering servant. He's God's king, God's sin bearer, God's sickness carrier. He is the one that Isaiah chapter 53 is all about. Jesus is him. It may feel obvious to us, but it would have been absolutely jaw-droppingly crazy to the people who were alive at the same time as Jesus. Jesus was just an ordinary man, wasn't he? One of us. He couldn't be the one, could he? The one who would not just take away our sicknesses and sins, like I might pick up with a pair of tongs my child's sick-covered shirt and drop it in the washing machine, or if it's really bad, in the bin. Jesus wouldn't just be the one who would take away our sickness and sins. He'd be the one who would bear them, who would put on the sick-covered clothes himself and take the consequences for the mess that we have made. Here he is, says Matthew. This Jesus, he's him. Come to Dr. Jesus, who can make you well. And that invitation is for us too. If this Roman centurion could come to Jesus, then so can we. Anyone can. Our problems are not too big for Jesus to handle. Our sins are not so great that he can't wear them himself and wash them away. Jesus can help us. He can make us well. But hold on. I know Christians who are sick. I've been sick. There are people in our own church family who live with pain and physical struggles every single day. We still seem to need human doctors and hospitals. We still die, even though we follow Jesus. Is Jesus not so good at healing today after all? Does he need to go back to medical school, maybe? Well, 3 things to say about Dr. Jesus' healing work today. The first is that Jesus does still heal. He does still heal today. I don't think he heals as many people as he did when he was walking on earth. That was a special season in his ministry when God the Father wanted everyone to hear about his king, what kind of king he was, what kind of kingdom he was bringing. But Jesus can and does still heal today. Just the other day, I read on the website of Open Doors, a Christian organisation, the story of Raina. Raina grew up in a Muslim family near Cairo in Egypt. She was horrified when her Muslim husband became a Christian. Soon after, her son became so sick, she thought he would die. Her husband prayed for her son. And as he prayed, Her son stopped shivering. His temperature went back to normal, and he was healed. And Raina became a Christian too that day. Jesus can still heal today. Pray and ask for his help if you're in pain. Jesus can heal today, but he often chooses not to. Jesus doesn't promise that he will deal with all of our pain straight away. He doesn't promise that he will heal us right here, right now. And sometimes, most of the time, he allows us to carry on feeling pain. Why? We don't ultimately know. Hopefully in heaven we will look back and understand a little more. The Bible does give us some clues. Sometimes Jesus lets our pain carry on to teach us. Maybe sometimes when life is good, people think that they don't really need God. They don't need to be Christian. They don't need to follow him, that they can do it all on their own. But pain shows us that we're small and weak, that we need God's help. It's often through tragedies that people come to Jesus. He uses pain not to punish us, but to teach us that we need him. Sometimes he uses pain to grow us. God often grows us the most, makes us the most like Jesus during the hard times. In Romans 5, Paul writes, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." Jesus lived a life of suffering. He was a man of sorrows. As we suffer and as we struggle, we learn to love him more and we long for him to return. God can use pain to grow us. And finally, God can use pain to use us. Often the people God most uses to bless other people and bring them to him are not the people who seem happy, healthy, successful, but the people who struggle. Think in the Bible of Naomi and of Job, who lost everything. Think of how David was changed through the loss of his child, how Paul was shaped by his thorn in the flesh. Think of someone like Joni Eareckson Tada today, who's paralyzed from the shoulders down when she was just 17 years old, and who God has used enormously over many decades since. Sometimes it's only when we've lived through pain that we can truly understand and connect with other people and bring them the love of Christ. Dr. Jesus still heals today. He often chooses not to, and that's hard, really hard, if you live in pain today. But there is hope, because one day he definitely will heal. He hasn't promised to heal every pain in the here and now, but he has promised that in the new creation, all our pain will be thrown in the dustbin forever. He's promised that he will wipe every tear from their eyes, that there will be no more mourning or crying or pain. All hurt will be gone forever. You will not suffer. Dr. Jesus will fully heal you, even if that feels so far away and so hard to imagine right now. Come to Dr. Jesus, God's great healer. Don't let pain put you off. Let it draw you even closer to him. But how are we to come? How do we come to Jesus? We see that in the story of the centurion. But before we do that, hopefully on your seat when you arrived, you found an envelope which said to be opened later. You might want to come back to your seat. If you're not on it now, grab that envelope and you can open it. Who can tell us what it is? Great, I heard most of what you said. It is an invitation from God to his party in heaven. And what do you do if you receive an invitation? Well, you have to respond, don't you? You have to tell the person who gave it to you whether or not you can come. And if you can go, you have to remember the date, the time, the location, and you have to go to the party. There's no use receiving an invitation, putting it up on your notice board, enjoying looking at it and thinking about the party, but not actually accepting the invitation and not going. Well, back to Matthew 8. Remember Jesus, who was bowled over by this centurion's faith, his humility, his understanding of who Jesus was, his trust in Jesus. Jesus bowled over that this Roman would realize and admit his unworthiness and not even ask Jesus to come to his house and beg Jesus to help him. Well, in verse 10, Jesus steps out of his conversation with the centurion and turns and talks to his followers instead. Let's read again what he says. Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Who of you has been to a party? Been to quite a few in my years. Jesus says here that heaven will be like a party, a feast, a banquet. Imagine the best party ever. With chocolate fountains, more flavors of ice cream than you can imagine, with bubble machines, smoke machines, all of your favorite songs, a huge dance floor, disco lights, bouncy castle kingdoms, elephants to ride on. Imagine. Heaven will be like a party, Jesus says. And then he explains to his followers who will be at the party in heaven and who won't be there. And I think what he says here was pretty shocking. Who will be there first? And many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast. Seems fairly straightforward. Probably some people will come from the north and the south as well. But this statement by Jesus that people would come from the east and the west to the party in heaven wouldn't necessarily have been taken as good news by Jesus' first listeners. Because it was people from here, they thought. God's ancient Israelite people and their descendants now living in God's land. Those would be the people who would get the places at the party in heaven, surely. The party in heaven was for people like them, people from here, people who could count Abraham as their ancestor, who'd been singing songs of God's rescue of their family from Egypt for their whole lives, who'd been worshipping at the temple since they were babies. The party in heaven, surely, was for people like them, people from here, people living in God's land, wasn't it? I once took Charlotte, my wife, to a swing dancing class. It was a beginner's class, apparently, but I realised when we got there that it wasn't really a class for people who, like me, did not know how to dance. Most of the people there were staying on for the rest of the evening, for the intermediate class, for the expert class, for the free dancing time. It wasn't really a place for me. The class was for them, for the people from there, from the people who already knew what to do, how it worked, how to dance. And so God's people at this time, many of them thought that the party in heaven was for people like them, people from here. But that's not what Jesus says. He says that the party in heaven is for the many who will come not just from here, but from all over, from the east and the west, for the people who nobody knows, who haven't been around for very long, who don't yet know all the rules, the people who aren't like us. These are the people who will take the best seats next to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So those are the people who will be there. But what about the people who won't be there? Well, verse 12, Jesus says, the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside. The word translated subjects could also be translated sons. The children of Abraham, the sons of Israel, the people from here, won't necessarily be at the party in heaven, Jesus warns. They'll be thrown outside into the darkness. Why? Well, it won't be because they haven't been invited. They were definitely invited. It will be because they have not accepted God's invitation. Jesus brought God's invitation. And many of the people who lived in his country and thought that they followed God his Father would not accept Jesus. There's one way, and one way only, to accept God's invitation to the party in heaven. And that's to accept and follow Jesus. It's to come to Jesus like that centurion did, knowing that you have nothing, knowing that you do not deserve his grace and kindness, knowing that you are full of sin and unworthy, and asking him to help you. If you haven't accepted Jesus' invitation yet, what's stopping you? Know that nothing else will get you into his party, into heaven. Not going to church, not being a good person, not even praying and reading your Bible every day, though those are great things to do. The only way to accept the invitation is to come to Dr. Jesus, admit your sin and say sorry for it, and ask for his help. And if you won't do that, then you won't get to go. But wonderfully, anyone who does accept Jesus' invitation, anyone who has accepted Jesus' invitation, anyone who has come to Jesus, like the centurion, well, their place at God's party in heaven is guaranteed. No one can take it away. It is theirs for sure. There's a seat in heaven that already has their name on it. And if that's you this morning, if you're a Christian, a follower of Jesus, someone who has admitted their sin, said sorry to God, and is living with Jesus as King, then know that your RSVP to God's party invitation has been accepted. And there's a seat in heaven which already has your name on it. And that is something to celebrate.